We've got 5 great films here, and they're great for one reason, because they tell the truth. But there is one film missing from this list that deserves to be on it, because ironically, it might tell the biggest truth of all, and that's Do the Right Thing. Yes, yes, yes.
3 Films and a Podcast has no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode. All film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders and is used solely with the intent of film criticism, commentary, and education under fair use law. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy.
Hi there. Welcome to 3 Films and a Podcast, the podcast that follows 3 friends as they expand their movie-watching horizons and challenge each other to watch as many new movies as possible. This all started because I found myself every night just kind of watching like the same old thing over and over again, typically The Office or Parks and Rec or some movie I'd already seen. And I realized that I have access to literally every movie ever made right here in my house. And I wasn't taking advantage of it. So I love movies, and I know my friend Ben loves movies, and I figured I'd reach out to him and see if we could come up with a way to challenge each other to just start seeing more films. So we came up with the idea to create rounds, so to speak, where we come up with a qualifier, and then each of us would choose a movie based on that qualifier that neither of us had seen. We would watch it, we'd record it, and then we would discuss it. And by record it, I mean on Letterboxd. We were doing that for a while. It was super fun, and Ben brought in Matt, and the 3 of us have been, just watching a bunch of new movies, and we realized we had a perfect opportunity between the 3 of us to put it on a podcast, share it with the world, and maybe get some feedback or maybe start a discussion with people that love movies all across the world. So that's kind of where we're at. We've been doing this for a while, but you as the listener are going to be jumping in as we discuss Spike Lee. That's how we're going to start off this podcast.
Ooh-wee. It's going to be a scorcher today.
Universal Pictures presents a new film from Spike Lee.
Good morning, Miss Mother Sister.
Now, Mookie, don't work too hard today. The man says it's gonna be hot as the devil.
I've been here 25 years. LaSalle's famous pizzeria is here to stay.
Trust me.
Mookie, the last time I trusted you, we ended up with a son.
I know you can't stand it. You can't stand it.
Hey, Sal, how we gonna burst on the wall here? You want brothers on the wall?
Love.
Get your own place. You can do what you want to do.
Doctor,
Come on, what?
always do the right thing.
That's it?
That's it.
I got it. I'm gone.
I feel like it's super relevant in today's day and age, I guess you could say. And so Ben and I were discussing Spike Lee, and I realized, embarrassingly, that I haven't really seen that many Spike Lee movies. So the first film that we're going to discuss is a nomination by Matt, and so I will let him set that up for you.
Yeah, so with Spike Lee movies, similarly, I found myself, I think I saw my first Spike Lee movie last year with BlacKkKlansman, and that's a hurdle everyone has to sort of overcome. It's just this repetition of movies that you just watch over and over again. And maybe it's not the same movies over and over again, but it's the same type of movies over and over again. Given this year, we're kind of hitting like a historic social movement with the things that have gone on. And with having not seen very many Spike Lee movies, I know that like I've taken pride over the last several years of at least considering myself like a semi-woke white guy who's like trying his best to see, be more empathetic and see things from different perspectives. But one thing that was different this time around is you had a lot of people in the Black community and some of my friends reaching out and saying like, hey, you need to listen to more Black voices. And that was kind of a call to action to like everybody. A lot of streaming services provided a lot of movies for free to watch. And that was something that I just like took to heart. And I know that one of those was Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee. It gives kind of and we'll get into this more, but it gives kind of a glimpse of what Brooklyn looks like through a black perspective, and the social issues, even in the early 90s or late 80s, early 90s, that they were facing then, and how relevant they are today. But yeah, that kind of went into my pick for Do the Right Thing, is just this call to action to listen to black voices. And I think that's why you chose Spike Lee, right now. And so Do the Right Thing kind of felt like we had to do the right thing in this round. Just since it's such a iconic piece of his work.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you nailed it right on the head. We need to be, I feel like I need to be more aware. Like you said, I feel like I'm pretty woke. I consider myself an ally to the black community, but in all honesty, I'm embarrassed to say that I honestly hadn't really taken the time to listen to what Spike Lee was having to say in his films, because I'd never seen them, frankly. And so, yeah, that's why we're here. I think it's super important that we talk about this, and I think, at the end of the day, it's just fun to watch these movies, and I think Spike Lee, now that we've dug in and watched some more of his work, I mean, I'm super impressed with the work he's done. Ben, why don't you kind of tell us about Do the Right Thing, tell us about the plot, kind of tell us briefly what to expect here.
Do the Right Thing was a movie from 1989. It was Spike Lee's third feature film, and it follows our protagonist is Mookie, played by Spike Lee. And essentially the story, broken down to its simplest terms, is there's a pizzeria in a shop in Brooklyn, and it's run by Danny Aiello, along with his sons. And one of the characters, Bugging Out, comes in, and he's eating pizza there, and he looks over on the Wall of Fame, and he sees that everybody up there is Italian-American. And he turns to Sal, and he says, "Why are there no black people here? This restaurant basically lives in a black neighborhood. Why are there only white people on the wall?" And Sal responds with, "Open up your own store. You can put whoever you want on the wall."
I need passion in my life.
Say he's a Mama Lou.
He's a Mama Lou? Yeah, right.
Yo, Mook.
A couple of words of Thai.
Okay.
Mookie.
So you know I'm still
What?
How come you got no brothers up on the wall?
Man, ask Sal, right?
Hey, Sal, how come you got no brothers up on the wall here?
You want brothers on the wall? Get your own place. You can do what you want to do. You can put your brothers and uncles and nieces and nephews, your stepfather, stepmother, whoever you want, you see? But this is my pizzeria. American Italians on the wall only. Take it easy, Pop. And you, hey, don't stop with me today.
What? Yeah, that might be fine, Sal, but you own this. Rarely do I see any American Italians eating in here. All I see is black folks. So since we spend much money here, we do have some say.
So Bugging Out then tries to start a protest in the community for Sal's. Basically, the rest of the movie follows Mookie and how this affects his day-to-day life because he works at Sal's. And that's essentially what Do the Right Thing is about.
Yeah, 100%. This movie, I had no idea really what to expect. I knew it was going to be, obviously, I guess you could say racially charged. I knew it would be profound. I knew it was going to challenge me, specifically me, as a white guy from Salt Lake City, Utah. It delivered, in the most simple terms. The thing that stuck out to me when the movie was over is, I don't know how you guys felt, but I felt so bummed out. Like, I loved the movie. I thought it was visually incredible. I thought it was compelling. I thought it was dynamic, but I was so depressed when the movie finished. And I just honestly finished watching it about 2 hours ago. The thing that bummed me out so much was, this literally could have taken place today. And I know that we're not the only people that are going to be saying that. And I know that after watching or reading your guys' reviews on Letterboxd, you feel the same way. But that's honestly what stuck out to me the most. which I think is interesting because the film itself is so time-stamped in its specific era with the clothing and the music and the art direction and all that stuff. And it's just so crazy that you could take that snapshot and you could just replace a few of the colors and a few of the songs in the soundtrack. It could have been set today. And I know you guys talked about that in your Letterboxd. So Matt, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you just said. Like, in my Letterboxd review, I think it was short, but it essentially said, like, man, like this issue that this tackles or this is highlighting, like Spike Lee's telling the story in 1989. This is obviously, this inspiration didn't come from nowhere. He didn't fabricate that type of situation to depict in film. Like he's speaking of, like he's showing everything about Brooklyn. Like it's a love letter to that street, that neighborhood. And so he's highlighting all the things that are great about it, that are beautiful about it. And I remember thinking, like, as I'm watching this, I'm like, why doesn't everybody know about this movie? Like, this feels like a cult classic. Like, people should be obsessed with this. Like, these characters, they should be like cult classics, like across, almost like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which is a movie that transcended, race. Like, there's as many white people who are into Fresh Prince as I mean, there's probably more black in the black community that are into it, but I just felt like this feels like a movie kind of in that area. And it wasn't until things started picking up with like those racially charged situations in the neighborhood that I was like, oh shoot, like there is a lot of baggage to this story, a lot of authenticity that, like you said, rings like could have been done today. And it's depressing that, that was filmed 30 years ago and it's just as relevant. And that's not hyperbole. Like it literally happened. The only difference is that we got to see it happen on live footage that people took, in the streets of Minneapolis. It was jarring and eye-opening. I think from like the perspective of a white person now watching that, it's like, how many cues could we have gotten about like what's really going on, and still just never address it.
I'll tell you how I felt about it. We're kind of jumping around here, and I feel like this conversation is going to kind of go from point A to point B really quick, and we're going to kind of jump all over the place. But I want to jump right to the end. For me, it's still really fresh, and I still really feel the movie. And I did some reading afterwards. I read Roger Ebert's review of the film, and I guess he was talking about someone that sat next to him in the theater who seemed more upset about Sal's having been burnt down than he did about Radio Raheem. And I'm going to be totally honest, I didn't necessarily feel worse for Sal or whatever, more so than I did the death of Radio Raheem. But I guess I actually did feel the worst for Sal. And I think that's sort of honestly embarrassing for me to say. But I think it's interesting, and I think Spike Lee did that on purpose because that scene ends the movie. The last thing we see is Sal's having been burnt to the ground and his conversation with Mookie.
What do you want?
I want my money. I want to get paid.
You don't work here no more.
Sal, I want my money.
Your money couldn't begin to pay for the window you broke.
Motherfucker window. Raider Raheem is dead.
I know he's dead. I was here. You remember? He's dead because of his buddy. That cocksucker started all this shit. He's responsible for that kid's death. And he wanted to close me, and you stood there like a fuck, and you watched him burn me down.
I watched it. I also watched the cops murder Raider Raheem. You didn't get over from the fucking insurance anyway, Sal. You know the deal.
What the fuck is wrong with you? This ain't about money. I could give a fuck about money. You see this fucking place? I built this fucking place with my bare fucking hands. Every light socket, every piece of tile. Me with these fucking hands. You know what the fuck that means?
Yeah, it means pay me my motherfucking money. That's what it means, Sal.
Okay. How much do I owe you?
My salary is $250. $250 a week.
I just thought it was crazy to me that I literally felt the same way, that Sal Sal seemed essentially innocent to me. He's just a guy trying to make pizza. He can't do it in his own neighborhood, so he went to a neighborhood where he felt appreciated. And then he ended up being, in some ways, the victim. And I 100% understand that Radio Raheem was the victim here, but I think in a way they're all victims. And I don't know. I'm just curious what you guys have to think about that.
Yeah, I feel like one of the greatest things that Do the Right Thing does is we don't have any clear-cut villains or heroes in this movie. I think Sal, sometimes gets positioned as the antagonist here, and, obviously in like Bugging Out the Case he is. But at the same time, we have a conversation between Sal, played by Danny Aiello, and John Turturro, who plays the son in the movie, and he just talks about, like, I was here before this neighborhood was built. Like, I take the biggest pride in the fact that I've, like, fed all the people here. Like,
It's like I come to work. It's Planet of the Apes. I don't like being around them. The animals. Why you got so much anger in you? Why? My friends, they laugh at me. I watch these little kids get old. And I seen the old people get older. Yeah, sure, some of them don't like us, but most of them do. I mean, for Christ's sake, Pino, they grew up on my food. On my food. And I'm very proud of that. Well, you may think it's funny, but I'm very proud of that.
He loves the community. He loves everyone there. And it's hard for him, I think, to feel that he's labeled as racist, as I imagine it is for anybody. I think we also see the relationship that he has, like when Mookie's sister comes in. Like, he does genuinely love the people there. And one of my favorite parts about the ending of this movie is I genuinely feel like it's open to interpretation as to, like, the reasoning that Mookie did this when it comes to the whole do the right thing. The crowd is surrounding Sal's and his sons. Radio Raheem has died, and basically the crowd wants blood, and rightfully so. So I think you can look at Mookie's actions in two different ways, which is, he takes a trash can and he throws it through the window. And in one sense, you can look at that as like, yes, he's inciting the violence and he's on the side of the rioters and he's doing the right thing in that sense, where it's like, let's burn this place down. I think the other way you can look at it is he knew all the attention was on Sal and his brothers, and he's worked and been with these people for years, and he knows who they are. At least he knows who Sal is in his heart. And so if he can take the mob and take their focus from Sal himself to the restaurant by destroying the restaurant, he's able to save these people's lives. And I think that's just an interesting way that's just left to our interpretation. In the next scene, like, it's Mookie just going back and saying, like, I just want my check, so like they just like have a chat afterwards, like it's no big deal, like, oh, sorry your building burned down, but like, I really just want to get paid. That's all I want. That's Mookie's like through line the whole time. It's like, I just want to get paid. Like, he's good at what he does, but I think he doesn't find any satisfaction in it. And so it's just like a job for him. Whereas Sal and his sons, it's like it's their lifeblood. This is what they do in the community. And unfortunately, John Turturro, as we see in what I think is like an excellent part of the movie, which is also very jarring, is when we get these direct POV camera shots of people just saying the nastiest stuff to each other.
Dago Wab, Guinea, garlic bread, pizza slinging, spaghetti bending, Victimone, Perry Como, Luciano Pavarotti, solo meal non-singer motherfucker.
You gold teeth, gold chain wearing, fried chicken and biscuit eating, monkey, ape, baboon, big thigh, fast running, high jumping, spear chucking, 360-degree basketball dunking, titsoon, spade, Moulignan. Take your fucking pizza and go the fuck back to Africa.
You little slanty-eyed, Mino-speaking American, own every fruit and vegetable stand in New York, bullshit Reverend Sun Young Moon, Summer Olympic 88 Korean kickboxing sabaran bitch.
You Goya bean eating, 15 in a car, 30 in an apartment, pointy shoes, red wearing, menudo, meter, Puerto Rican cocksucker. Yeah, you.
It's cheap. I got good price for you. Now catch it. How I'm doing? Chocolate egg cream drinking, bagel and deluxe, banana for this Jew asshole.
And that's just like, it's hard to watch. And I remember, reading some of the reviews about it, and John Turturro told Spike, like, you've got to let people know this is not who I am, because I'm going to get killed if I go in New York after people see this movie. Like, he didn't want to say it. And I know Danny Aiello fought about saying the N-word in the movie. It's like, so you know who these people are in their heart, and that's what happens, when you play a character. But what a good movie does is it evokes emotion out of people and it makes people think. And that's what, good actors can do. They can make you feel that they feel this way. So I don't know. I love the final scene. Like I put that, I believe, in my letterbox as well. It's like, that's one of my favorite shots ever. It's just the long shot from him taking the trash out, walking forward and throwing the trash can through the window. Like it's one of the best shots ever. And I just feel like Do the Right Thing it's a seminal, like it's Spike Lee at his best. And it's amazing that it was his third movie. You can say he's made better stuff later on, and you could argue that to the death, and you wouldn't necessarily be wrong. But I think the fact that Do the Right Thing really put his stamp in the film culture, in the film society.
For sure. And I think it's bananas that he wrote, directed, and acted, and possibly more. I'm sure, I don't know if he produced it or whatever. Here we are doing a movie podcast, and I don't know anything about it, but I think it's incredibly impressive. I want to talk about Sal a little bit more. Like I said before, he specifically went to go work in that community because he couldn't do what he wanted to do in his own community because it was too saturated or whatever. So he went to, I think I said, he went to a place where it would be appreciated. And you mentioned he truly did love serving that community. And I mean, obviously he's making money off of it, but I guess with that in mind, like, how much responsibility do you think Sal has, or, I mean, frankly, anyone has in, I guess I want to talk about assimilation, because like you said, this all jumps off because Bugging Out is upset there's no representation of his culture in his neighborhood in this pizza place. And I have my own personal anecdote relating to this, but I'm curious what you guys think. What responsibility do we have to assimilate, I guess?
I think, like, when you take the character of Sal, I found the characters just super interesting, the way they all contrast each other. And I think Sal has his two sons, and I feel like on the one hand you have the racist, the very completely out there racist, doesn't hide it, doesn't shy away from his distaste. And then you have the son who seems way more of the ally, who really probably is way more progressive and socially accepting, and probably doesn't see any difference, or it probably is the true ally to the black community. And then you have Sal, who I feel is probably the embodiment of our society in trying to still serve the black community, but at the same time stay distanced enough, whereas this is mine. This is my establishment. I built it with my blood, sweat, and tears, and that I don't really owe it to anybody. And to your point, Fuzz, the white person in me did feel for Sal, because when Bugging Out and Radio Raheem come in and demand these things, there's some rudeness there, and that's your first inclination. It's well, maybe if they just asked nicer, maybe if they just felt, maybe if they just changed the way they presented it and had a conversation about it.
Good, man. Fight the power! Fight the power! We've got to fight the powers that be! Elvis was a hero to most, but he never meant shit to me. Yes, he's straight out racist, the sucker.
What I tell you about that noise? What I tell you about that pitch? What the fuck are you dead? Are you? Fuck you! We want the black people on that motherfucking wall of fame now!
Try to go fucking home and be all fucking day fucking out!
With that jungle music off, we ain't enough! Why ain't gonna be about jungle music? Why ain't gonna be about Africa? It's about them fucking bitches! It's about turning that shit off and get the fuck out of my place! Ready or right? Fuck you! And fuck you too!
But the fact of the matter is, there was just this air of being above the community. Even though he's serving the community and he was there, there's this air of I was here first. And I think American society is that way. For the first time this year, I read Frederick Douglass's address on the 4th of July, back when there were still slaves in the United States. And he just talked about how big of a slap in the face that was for slaves, that people were celebrating independence. And this idea that the white man started America, and that it was off of the sweat of our backs that we endured, but like they were the economy. Like we benefited off of free labor for years and years and years, giving them no credit. And so I think we do bear a responsibility to sort of recognize that it wasn't white people that built everything. And we give ourselves way too much credit. And even watching that, it took analysis afterward to realize like, oh, dang, like, yes, like Sal did start it there, like before the black neighborhood was there, but they're the ones who gave him business the whole time. Like, and he is there in his community, in their community.
Yeah. I brought that scene up specifically, not only because it's sort of the catalyst for everything that happens in the movie, but it actually hits pretty close to home to me in a lot of ways. So you guys know this, our listeners don't know this, but I actually live in Portland, Oregon, and I live in a specific neighborhood in Portland that has a very not so great racial past. The neighborhood I live in was, during this time of segregation, was the neighborhood where black people were, quote, allowed to live. And it has been heavily gentrified, something that I didn't really know when I moved in, and something that I honestly struggle with, because there's a little restaurant down on the corner. When I first moved here, it was sort of like, it seemed to me to be a sort of holdout from what the neighborhood used to be. When I would go in there, everyone in there was black. I would typically be the only white person in there, and all over their walls was just pictures of black leaders, black heroes, important black people throughout history, and I always loved that. I always loved how proud they were of their history and their community, and through whatever circumstances, they lost their liquor license. Someone else got a hold of that license, moved in, and changed it. And when I went back in, the new owners kept everything exactly the same, but the only thing they changed was the pictures on the wall. They still put pictures on the wall, and they didn't completely whitewash it, but they definitely made it their own. And I don't really necessarily have a stance on that, but it's definitely stuck out to me. That these people that opened up the restaurant once they took over the liquor license, how much do they really owe it to the community to keep it the way it was? Because now when I go in there, it's not the same. There's different people in there, even though the look of it still looks the same. And I just think, to me, it just really stuck out in the movie because that's sort of happened to me.
I think it's a good point in the sense that we feel like Sal, again, not to repeat it, but he genuinely feels like he's serving the community and he takes pride in that. Whereas his son, John Turturro's character, comes across like the people here should respect us for what we're bringing to the community. And granted, there's 4 jobs that we see in that pizzeria, and only one of them goes to a black person. And that's Mookie. And that's kind of where, again, like we're tied in with the protagonist here. And after the bugging out stuff happens, he has to kick Buggin out of the restaurant. He's like, dude, don't screw up my job. You know what I mean? Like, I get what you're saying, but please don't screw up my situation that I have going here.
Mookie, you want to get your friend out of here?
Well, you gonna kick me out now? Or you gonna kick me out, huh?
No, I'm not kicking you out. You're kicking yourself out.
What? Look, we got some brothers up on the wall, Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela, Michael Jordan, tomorrow.
Come on, Mookie, get him out, all right?
I'm trying to get him out.
I paid for it.
I know you paid for it. Let's go.
Yeah, all right. She's kicking me out. Beat me in the head and gonna kick me out, right?
Come on, let's
go. Okay, bet. Yeah, all right.
Let's
I paid for my... Look, boycott Styles.
Go.
Right? Boycott Styles.
I got your boycott swinging.
Boycott Styles. Yo, man, what you laughing at? I paid for my slice, man. Yo, man, I spent much money in there.
What are you trying to do?
What am I trying to do?
And I feel like one of the subplots or the second stories in the movie is the Korean grocer that comes in. And we have the 3 dudes that are like sitting on the sidewalk, just hanging out, talking, like some of the best stuff in the movie. As far as I understand it, almost all of it completely impromptu, which is great. But they notice how, this store right here used to be boarded up, and then they just come in and open something. It's like, well, why do they just get to come in and move here? Like, we've been trying to like open stuff here forever. And I think, again, that's just like another representation of like these 2 different types of stores in a black community that aren't run by black people. One that, I guess you could considered grandfathered in, like Sal's, who had been there the whole time, and then the Korean grocer on the corner who just opened up out of nowhere, and their frustrations toward that. Like, well, why did they get to do this? Why can't we open up a store right now?
Look at those Korean motherfuckers across the street. I bet you they haven't been off the boat a year before they open up their own place.
That's right, man. It's been about a year.
A motherfucking year off the motherfucking boat, and they already got a business in our neighborhood, a good business, occupying a building that had been boarded up for longer than I care to remember. And I've been here a long time.
Man, you've been here a long time.
Yeah, boy. And now, for the life of me, I can't figure this out. Either them Korean motherfuckers are geniuses, or you black asses are just plain dumb.
Fuck you. It's got to be because we are black. Ain't no other explanation. No, I know, man. You know,
man,
ain't they always trying to keep the black man to be about shit? I'm saying.
You motherfuckers hold this shit down. Tired of hearing that old excuse. Tired of hearing that shit.
I tell you, I swear, man, I will be one happy fool when we open our own business right here in our neighborhood. I swear to God, I will be the first in line to spend what little money I got.
Right there with you, man.
You motherfuckers always talking that old Keith Sweat shit. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. You ain't gonna do a goddamn thing. You ain't but sit y'all monkey ass on this corner. Hey, man, when you gonna get your business?
I think that's, again, like you said, kind of where it comes up about what do you owe to the community that you grow your business in. You know, I think it's worthy to, I guess, acknowledge like who your patrons are and to pay them some respect. But that's the part of Do the Right Thing that's so tricky, because you can see both Sal and Bugging Out's point. Like, we're here, your business wouldn't exist without us. And to Sal's point, it's like, well, yeah, but I've provided a job for someone here. I'm providing food for the community. So it's like, this is my store. I'm going to put who I want there. It's just, it creates such a interesting, I don't know if it's a catch-22, but interesting thing to think about when it comes to this movie. And again, why I feel like there isn't necessarily a black and white side to the story, no pun intended.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of what my anecdote was trying to get at with that little story is I don't really know how I feel about it, having lived through it somewhat personally, obviously not to the extent that Mookie and Bugging Out did. Speaking of Mookie, let's talk a little bit about him. His character to me was super interesting, and I think, obviously I don't think Spike Lee did anything on accident in this movie. I think, and he obviously played Mookie, but how much do we like Mookie? Like, is he someone that we're rooting for? Like, is he? I guess I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but he's an interesting person to see this all through and follow through, because, like, who is Mookie? I don't know if that makes any sense, but I can't wrap my head around who Mookie is. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I think Spike did a great job of creating a character that kind of exists in the gray, so to speak. He's our protagonist in the sense that he's our main character that we're following around, but he's not necessarily just a 100% great guy. We see him, deliver pizzas to his girlfriend and then want to stay and fool around for a while and not necessarily get back to work, which, like, we can all relate to not wanting to get back to work and stuff, but it also just kind of shows, like, he's thankful for the job he has and he needs it, but also not really doing a whole lot to necessarily keep it or put in a lot of extra effort. And they bring that up when he goes into Sal's. He gets a lot of shit from the other guys about, like, how long it takes him to do this. So I think we're there to sympathize and get to know him, and we understand, like, his situation that he's in, or we're exposed to the situation that he's in with Rosie Perez and having a kid and just the neighborhood in itself. And again, like, with the mayor telling him, like, just do the right thing, it's just you get this pressure that's put on him to make sure he's always making the right choices. And I think throughout the movie we see someone who we don't necessarily see a lot of clear motivation in this character about what he is or isn't going to do. And that's why the ending is so powerful, because at that point he has to decide for him what is the right thing to do. And then it's left to us to kind of interpret why he did that thing.
Yeah. I had a point. I had a thought, but I lost it. Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I feel like some of these characters that Spike Lee's sort of portrayed are sort of that there is something foreign about them, I think, to someone who grew up in the white suburbs of Salt Lake, because there are several things that they face that may not be relatable. But then even the things that are maybe relatable, I think it challenges white viewers to realize that, like, Mookie's an everyday guy. Like, none of what he does is because he's black. And as disappointing as it is, you hear those type of racist attributions to the black community or to the Latinx community. And they're just like blanket statements covering like an entire race. And I think white viewers may judge Mookie under a different microscope than a black viewer would. Even though there are like, Mookie's very different from Radio Raheem. He's very different from Bugging Out. And like, people may watch that movie, and there's that type of meme that was going around several years ago where you'd post a poster of a movie and then you tag your friends who was the character from that movie. And I think that's probably easier for people in the black community to do that. They could probably relate to it a lot better. But I do think the interesting thing about Mookie is that he's also the one ready to apologize for the white people, and I think that's a barrier for a lot in the black community. Like, when there's clear wrongdoing, he kind of plays this role of, one of you guys pointed out, like, he doesn't want to lose his job. Like, yeah, it probably bothers him that there's no black people on the wall in the pizzeria, and he's obviously very socially aware of everything that's going down, but like, not enough to lose his job over. And I think that's a hurdle even this year that people are having to overcome. Like, do I go protest in the streets over losing my job? Do I point out, do I call out racism at work when it comes up in like a meeting, or and risk like what that looks like for me? Or do I stay silent and, just let things happen and never make a change? And so I feel like Mookie's it's almost like this is like that coming of age thing for him in as far as like social issues go. And that's where, like, at the end, when he decides to do something, it's they kind of set that up. Like, he doesn't do anything the whole movie until that one scene where he's like trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. Mookie I think he's a very interesting character to follow. And I think, in all honesty, I think he probably is the most, he might be the easiest character for people to attach themselves to, because we don't really get a sense of who Mookie really is. I mean, he sticks up for his friend, but he also, kneels down to Sal, and he obviously goes to work, and he obviously has some level of care to Sal, but he also doesn't really give a shit about his job. He seems to care about his family, but he also, from what they say, doesn't seem to be around very much.
You think you're slick, Tina.
I know. How else was I going to get you up here? I haven't seen you for a week.
I'm working, making money, getting paid.
I think he kind of is every end of every spectrum, and I think maybe that's why. Maybe it was just easiest for a viewer for coming from anywhere to attach themselves to Mookie, because there's parts of him that everyone can see in themselves. And on that note, I actually thought, my first thought watching the movie, when we're watching Mookie leave the house and walk through the streets, is, Spike Lee's notorious for making New York films, and New York as a city is a huge character in his work. And I thought it was really cool how he portrayed Mookie walking down the street to be almost like, it was like a parallel to if you were to watch a character walking down a white suburban street. There's birds chirping, the suns are shining, we've got the positive music on the radio, the DJ's super happy. Oh, it's going to be a hot day. It's going to be a great day. And everyone's saying hi to Mookie, and he's saying hi to everyone. And, we start to meet a lot of different characters. And I thought it was really cool to see New York in that light and portrayed that way, because typically when you see New York, it's in a movie like I don't know, like the 25th Hour, which we're going to talk about later, or, just whatever. It's usually dark. It's usually dirty. It's usually scary. And I really, really, really loved seeing New York portrayed in that way. And I thought it was really fun to watch New York as a character progress and shift and change throughout the movie. I have some notes here that, like, in the beginning, I just, it felt like very suburban. It felt like a nice community. And I thought, like, oh, man, I'd love to live in a community like that. Like, I would, saying hi to your neighbors, and it's just, there's something romantic about the brownstones and the way New York looks and the vibe and the feel of it. And then as the movie goes along, I wrote down, I could never live in a place like this. Like, just the constant pressure from, you can't be inside because it's too hot. You can't be outside because it's too hot. It's not comfortable anywhere. No matter where you are, someone's giving you shit. Like, it's just this constant, there's someone always on you. And I thought that was... that was one of the most interesting parts of the movie to me, is just watching how New York can just shift and mold and change. And I wrote down, I wonder if I had grown up there, what I would be like. Because my thought is, like, I could never live in a place like that. But I wonder if that's only because I didn't grow up there. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are about community, I guess you could say.
I mean, I think the way that he displays it is great. I mean, it's so bright and vivid. It's kind of funny that this is, in a sense, the same town that Batman lives in. You try to think about, this being Gotham of some sort, you know what I mean? It's just like, oh, this is like totally different. But I love the way it's shown. It was shot by Ernest Dickerson, who did a few Spike Lee movies, before moving on to directing on his own. As you mentioned earlier, this is a very, very late 80s, early 90s movie. I know the first time I watched this, I was like, did they just invent the fisheye lens before this movie came out? Because there are so many like wide open shots. Like, full disclosure, I didn't get this movie the first time I watched it. It's like, I don't understand it. Like,
when was the first time you watched it?
I just don't get it. I want to say I was like, it was probably film school, honestly. I think that was like the first time I watched it, and I just didn't understand the connection of how great it is. I mean, this is... Since watching it again, I think I've realized, for better or worse, they have their own history between themselves. But I feel like what Tarantino is to Pulp Fiction is what Spike Lee is to Do the Right Thing. Like, this set the tone for the kind of director he was going to be. And it just like exposes us to so much of what he's going to do later on. So I just didn't connect necessarily like that. That's where you can definitely see the timestamp of what this is. But it's also fantastic, as a time capsule where we just get what feels like 10 minutes of like Rosie Perez just like dancing nonstop at the beginning. And just quick tangent, I mean, speaking of Rosie Perez, this was her and Martin Lawrence's first movie ever, which is awesome that we get to see this. And then in the Roger Ebert review, he doesn't even mention Samuel Jackson by name. I mean, that he wasn't a huge person at the time, but it's like, now we go back and look at this and we just have this fantastic cast that's in here. And it's a wonderful time capsule of the time. So now I can definitely appreciate what the story is and the cinematography and the way it looks. And one thing I thought about in watching it again, it's just that I think what I connected to so much and why I liked the visuals of this movie so much is I think you could almost make this into a stage play. Like, I feel like we have 3-4 locations, Sal's. I mean, there's a bunch that they could show, but really, like, we just have some primary locations here. And it's also just kind of written that way where you get to know who all these characters are. Like, we have so many people coming in and out between like Radio Raheem. And I mean, there's too many to name, but it's just a fantastic ensemble of people while still being focused on Mookie and Sal and what's going on in the community. So like, I loved seeing the stuff with like the fire hydrant and the can that's open on both sides. Like when they spray that dude's car, it's like, we all as the audience know it's coming. And he's just like beyond bummed. But that was like one of the best parts of the movie. It's like, yeah, this is what you do when it's like 100 and whatever degrees and you've got nothing else going on. It's like, let's crack the fire hydrant open and let's cool ourselves down. So I think it was great to kind of see how this community, like, I guess, bonded with each other. And that also just ties into the whole movie when you get to the end and the whole community is still bonded,
I had that same exact thought. Like, I can't remember exactly what scene it was, but I remember thinking like, oh, this would be a fantastic play. Like, this would be an incredible live action. Like, I love the way that Spike is able to. I just love the way he shows the city. Matt, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, like I felt the same way, and like I mentioned, like that opening sequence, I just felt like this feels like a cult classic. Like I'm already into it. I'm already into Mookie. I'm already into like bugging out these people that it's showing. It's like, why isn't this shown more? And that's kind of how I felt like. Yeah, I don't know. It is. I mean, that's like one of the core problems. Like this movie, as iconic as it is and how attached it is to Spike Lee, this movie isn't shown enough. Just because of like what it carries with it. And I think like there is that sort of safety that we're supposed to feel, like this sunshiny safety that we're supposed to feel at this beginning. Like this is like a happy, functional community. And then we get to see what happens when, something causes stress in a community like that. But I loved sort of glimpse at late 80s Brooklyn, and it is like a unique view. It was like seeing New York for the first time again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well said. I think it's evident how much Spike Lee loves New York City and how proud he is to have been from there. I wanted to talk about John Turturro. I don't really know specifically what I want to talk about. I just was struck. He jumped off the screen for me. I think as much as I hated his character, I think he might be one of my favorite performances. He seemed very real to me. All of the characters to me are fully realized, and I could see going in a time machine, dropping into Brooklyn in 1989 and running into all of those people. But for whatever reason, John Turturro, to me, his character just really popped off the screen to me. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts or...
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, one of my favorite things to do after watching a movie for the first time is like to go right to IMDb and read the trivia and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. And I was surprised to learn that Danny Aiello was the only Oscar-nominated person from this movie for acting. Spike Lee also was nominated for writing, but I feel like Turturro really just owned every scene he was in. And I think the fact that he was able to get so much emotion and I don't know, just so much of a reaction out of me. I know he's an actor, but that's just something else, And again, like he brought up a Spike. He's like, you've got to like vouch for me outside of this movie and he was right, because he comes across like such an asshole in this movie. It's just like the son who doesn't necessarily realize the kind of privilege he has and thinks the community that he's in owes him a favor. He's like, and he's just, I think he's the clear racist in the movie, and we see that a lot, like with Spike Lee when he's asking him, he's like, hey, who's your favorite musician? Like, who's your favorite actor? Who's your favorite athlete?
Can I talk to you for a second?
What?
Pino, who's your favorite basketball player?
Magic Johnson.
Who's your favorite movie star?
Eddie Murphy.
Who's your favorite rock star? Prince. You're a Prince fan.
Boss, Bruce.
Prince.
Bruce.
Pino, all you ever talk about is nigga this and nigga that. And all your favorite people are so-called niggas.
It's different. Magic, Eddie, Prince are not niggas. I mean, they're not black. I mean, let me explain myself. They're not really black. I mean, they're black, but they're not really black. They're more than black. It's different.
It's different?
Yeah, to me, it's different.
Pino, deep down inside, I think you wish you were black.
Get the fuck out of here.
Laugh if you want to. Your hair is kinkier than mine.
Every single person that he lists is black, and I think Mookie's trying to get him to realize, like, you actually do like, a lot of these people. You just maybe don't feel like you do. And that's the problem here. It's just like they feel like a famous African-American person to him just feels different than the community that he lives in.
He says they're more
so
than.
Much of that yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're more than that. And I think, again, that just, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but that just kind of speaks to John Turturro and how wonderful of an actor he is. Like, I did not like who he was in this movie, and I think it just speaks volumes about how great he was in it.
For sure. I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that, Matt?
Yeah, a little bit. I think Ben covered most of it, but I think with his character, and it's interesting because I feel like, we talked about, like, we all try to be allies We're all like woke. I mean, to a certain degree, I think we're all trying to learn more and be better. But I think depending on where you're at on that spectrum, his character is viewed differently. And I mean, every character is viewed differently. And there was an interesting review that I read ahead of time before I even watched the movie. And it said, like, in the end, when black people were asked whether Mookie did the right thing, 100% of them said yes. And it was only the white audience that was sort of torn about how everything turned out. And I think with a character like his, there's a lot of that in the communities we grew up in, and just a lot of bottled up. Like he's not overtly racist until like towards the end, where he's able to like spout off all these like negative, like vile things that he feels. But all it takes is like a little bit of stress or another straw on the camel's back for someone to break and really show some of that, like, that ugliness. And obviously we saw like what Sal's breaking point was, and he wasn't even like a bad character. He wasn't even a bad guy. Like he legitimately tried, and he did have some underlying errors that maybe we as white people like to excuse because we can relate to them a little better and we can kind of see where he's coming from. But that's what I love about all of this from Spike Lee's perspective, because with feedback, you're never going to get honest feedback unless you completely take yourself out of it. And Spike Lee, as a black artist, is able to sort of rip the Band-Aid off and show us some truth about ourselves that we wouldn't be able to see otherwise, and that a white director, a white writer could not coach or direct someone to do the way that they did with him.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else I could possibly add to what you guys had to say. Who's Radio Raheem to you? Like, to me, in a weird way, he had the same sort of vibe. Not the same person, not the same character by any means, but he sort of felt like he sort of reminded me of Debo, and I hesitate to even make that connection, but he seemed to have this stranglehold on the community. Like, I couldn't tell if it was if they were afraid of Radio Raheem, or if he was like just like sort of like a mythic character to the people in this movie. I was struck by the fact that he turned his radio down for Mookie, but no one else. I thought that was super interesting.
Raheem! China.
World.
Where you headed to?
I'm going to get a slice.
You going down the south?
Word.
I gotta make some deliveries and I'll check you back there, right?
On the rebound.
Bet. All right. Oh shit! Let me check it out. That's the hype!
Newest, latest. Let me tell you the story of right hand, left hand. It's a tale of good and evil. Hate. It was with this hand that Cain iced his brother. Love. These 5 fingers, they go straight to the soul of man. The right hand, the hand of love.
I couldn't get a sense of who Radio Raheem was. I feel like there was 3 sort of mythical characters. There was obviously the mayor. There was obviously was it Mother Sister or Sister Mother? I can't remember.
Mother Sister.
There was
yeah.
Mother Sister. There's the mayor, and there's Radio Raheem. And it seemed like Sister Mother was like the all-seeing, like, you know, the mother of the neighborhood. The mayor was sort of the guardian angel of the neighborhood, the unassuming. He was in like every scene. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but he seemed to just be maybe like off in the distance. You could see him in the background. Obviously not every scene, but he was a constant throughout the movie, almost more so than in the same way that like Mookie was. And then there's Radio Raheem, who seems to be sort of like almost this agent of chaos, but he doesn't. The chaos at the end is centered around him in a lot of ways, but I just I can't get a sense of who he is, and I just was curious your guys' thoughts, if you could help me figure that out.
I feel like, I mean, just an interesting thing to bring up real quick. You mentioned DeMayer and Mother Sister, played by Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee, who in real life were married. So I think that brings a real interesting, I mean, they acted a lot together, over the years. I think their dynamic was just so interesting because I agree, Mother Sister was almost like, I guess you could almost call her like an oracle or something like that. Like she could see everything. And I feel like DeMayer, like you said, like when we talked about this almost being a play, I feel like he could have been like the narrator where he's taking us through scene to scene, and he's like a guardian angel, but also kind of played off like the town drunk, or like that was his past or whatever.
Hey, you old drunk. What did I tell you about drinking in front of my stoop? Move on, you're blocking my view. You are ugly enough. Don't stare at me. The evil eye doesn't work on me.
Mother Sister, you've been talking about me for 18 years. What have I ever done to you?
You're a drunk fool.
Besides that, the mayor don't bother nobody. And nobody don't bother the mayor. But you, the mayor just tend to his own business. I love everybody. I even love you.
Hold your tongue. You don't have that much love.
One day, you're gonna be nice to me. We may both be dead and buried, but you're gonna be nice. At least civil.
And Radio Raheem to me is just like he is a mythical creature that I feel around the community is just served with nothing but respect. I don't think it's a fear thing. I don't think it's like being scared of him or anything along those lines. I think people just kind of like respect the person, who he is and what he does. And what he does is he plays awesome music on his boombox, just walking around, so I feel like that's also why he was, the perfect character for how the ending happened, because there was no problem with Radio Raheem. He was respectful of people and vice versa. It's just like, I'm walking here, let me through here type thing without being rude. Like a lot of the friends, like the Martin Lawrence character, all those guys, like they're known, they get very vocal, and they'll get into fights like that with the dude who's wearing like the Larry Bird jersey.
Yo! Yo! Yeah. You almost knocked me down, man. The word is excuse me.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Not only did you knock me down, you stepped on my brand new white Air Jordans that I just bought. And that's all you can say is excuse me.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. I'll fuck you up quick 2 times. 2 times? Who told you to step on my sneakers? Who told you to walk on my side of the block? Who told you to be in my neighborhood?
I own this brownstone.
Who told you to buy a brownstone on my block in my neighborhood on my side of the street? Then why'd you move back to Massachusetts?
I was born in Brooklyn.
Like they'll get all that stuff going on, but Radio Raheem's keeping to himself, doing his thing. I just feel like he's served so much respect. I think he's just a mythical character in the movie, and I think he fits in wonderfully there. I loved all the scenes with him, and like you said, the one time he does turn it down, it's for Mookie. He won't do it for Sal, and that's understandable, and that's what like sets off this final conflict. But I loved his character. I loved who he was.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, the jam that he's playing throughout most of it's that "Fight the Power" song, and I wonder if, like, as his role as like this mythical character, he's that sort of like revolutionary spirit in the Black community, that is demanding respect when many of them don't expect respect or don't get respect and are I guess they settle, they conform, and he's a nonconformist. He doesn't even want to conform to turn his radio down. And it's kind of just like this music in the backdrop of their lives, I guess, telling them to act and telling them to be respected. And when he's quite literally strangled to death, that's when things go crazy, right? Like, it's his point's made, and like he's the one that's being silenced,
Right. So do you think that Radio Raheem was more a collective of the neighborhood psyche? Like his character was sort of like a representation of how the neighborhood feels about itself? Because if you look at a lot of the conversations that are had, like the three men that are sitting around chatting, bullshitting, who were probably one of my favorite parts of the movie, just listening to them talk. I could sit at that, if I was allowed to, I would sit at that table with them forever and just listen to them go on and on. But it seems like they feel disrespected about the Koreans moving in or the Italians moving in.
Yeah.
The Puerto Ricans on the stoop, they feel disrespected because Raheem comes and drowns out their own music. Ultimately, they realize that they have been bested and they turn down their music. But, you know, on and on and on, it seems like I feel like Radio Raheem's probably a representation of the collective psyche of the community. And I wouldn't have come to that conclusion without talking about this with you guys. Which is why I'm so happy we're doing this together.
Just to piggyback on that, if you don't mind real quick, like I think even the fact that hammers that home even more is that Spike Lee went to Public Enemy and had them write this song for this movie. So the song that we hear him playing throughout the whole movie is an anthem that was written specifically for this. Obviously, it has lived on well beyond Do the Right Thing, but I think that it speaks even more that what Radio Raheem represents is the collective and basically the conscience of the community. And so when his voice was silenced, that's when their voice felt silenced, and that's why we get the reaction they did.
What do you think happened after that? Like, what do you think? Do you think... I'm fairly cynical, and in real life we can see that frankly nothing's happened because as we've discussed, we're literally going through the same thing now. But I'm just curious, like, how do you think the neighborhood responded? I don't know how. I don't have a thought. I'm just curious if you guys have an idea. How do you think if we were to see the next day, what do you think happens there?
My thought would be, the next day, I think it'd be similar to what we saw this year. Obviously, ours was like on a national and global scale, so it probably wouldn't match that. But from a community standpoint, I'm sure there would have been outrage for a little while. But I think what Spike Lee also did was he showed sort of the generational differences. So you had, the mayor, mother, sister. You had those three dudes that were sitting and watching, and then you had Radio Raheem. And I feel like that was a really good separation of the three generations. And I think it shows what's naturally going to happen. Like that younger generation is always going to have the fight. They're going to have that conscience that this isn't right, that we deserve better. And it takes something like Radio Raheem being silenced to eventually push that generation into that next phase where they're just sitting and watching and pointing out all the things that aren't right, but they're just sitting. They're not acting anymore. And then you become the mayor or the mother sister where you're kind of just you've been there. You've seen all of this before. You've already lived everything that they're living. And so now you're kind of this a lot wiser, and you're just trying to look after everybody and keep everyone in line, having already tread that road before.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. Again, I feel like when we see them, Mookie and Sal together the next day, it just kind of seems like it doesn't really get addressed a whole lot. It's just kind of I just want to get paid, and it's almost like maybe clearer heads have prevailed the next day. A lot of the emotion comes out in that final scene. And unfortunately, as Matt has mentioned, and as we all know in our society, for so long, something awful happens and then it just fades away. We forget about it and just keep moving on. So I hope that's not what happened here. I wondered too, what does Sal do in this situation? Because we just learned a little bit before this happens that he's I'm going to, sign it over to my sons. It's going to be Sal's. And is it Sal and Sons? Yeah. I think Sal's and Sons, something like that. So yeah, what are they going to do? You know what I mean? Do they can't, get a place in the neighborhood they're in. So do they rebuild there? Or after something like this happens, is all good faith lost? And there's no having it. You know what I mean? There's no coming back. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure what happens after this.
One thing that struck me that I thought about is especially in that final scene, I think you can see it starts off obviously contentious considering what everything that has gone on, but then it ends with them just like, all right, well, here's your money, like, bye. You know what I mean? Like, it almost seemed like, in a way, that no one was surprised that any of this happened. And obviously, the way that we see it, you know, we go through the day to day and we see the different tensions through that montage of "I wrote the fuck you racist" segment. That was my note. That we can just see that, like, everyone there feels put out by the other in the movie.
Yeah.
And when it all comes to a head, it's almost just like, well, yeah, duh. You know what I mean? That's like the unfortunate vibe I got. What I saw is like the unfortunate reality is like it was almost destined to happen. And something I wrote, which is like a kind of a weird note to write, but I just wrote, racism is so weird because when you put like that montage of everyone, you know, talking about why they hate the Koreans, why they hate the Puerto Ricans, why they hate the whites, why they hate the blacks, whoever it is, like they're all saying the same shit and they're all picking who to hate. And it's just like, it just seems, you know, I'm not trying to be like white guy on a soapbox, social justice warrior, but it just doesn't make any sense. And I obviously to me, that's what Spike is trying to say here is like, we're all in this community and like, they're all bringing something to it. And the fact that it all came to a head and blew up wasn't a surprise to anyone. And I think, I don't know. I think it's provocative. I think it's profound. I think it's really sad. And I was depressed for about an hour until I got the opportunity to talk to you guys about it. We've gone for about an hour now. I'm curious if you guys have any other closing thoughts, anything else you want to say. And then I have a few more questions I can ask, but yeah.
I mean, I just think this is a insanely powerful film and something that we could just continuously say over and over again, but you know, came out in 1989, but it could come out today and just be as relevant, which is sad.
Yeah.
You know, it's awful that that's the situation that we're in, but hopefully, you know, creators like this and stories like this can be told more and get more black voices uplifted throughout the community all over. I think this is a wonderful film. Just one of the best.
For sure.
Yeah, and agreeing with that 100%. Like, if this could be viewed more, I think, like, growing up, I'm sure we all heard, like, oh, they're playing the race card again. Like, everything that they're complaining about is, like, hyperbole. Like, it's not like that. And that's easy to say in Utah when, like, the black population's, like, less than 2%. And so, like, we literally grew up with, like, almost no black people in our community. So not only do we not know, like, at all, but two, like, what gives us the inclination that, like, they would make something like that up or that they're not having these experiences every single day? And I think it is, like, I'm continually embarrassed that this was 1989 and that obviously this was filmed this way because that was a problem. And we're facing the exact same thing today. And not only that, we're still hearing people make excuses and make exceptions like, oh, this is a one-time thing. Like, and it's just disappointing. Like, I think it should be viewed more, just from a society standpoint. And then from just a filmmaking standpoint, as Ben said earlier on, this really sets up everything that Spike Lee brings to his filmmaking in the rest of his career. And he does that in different ways. Like, not every one film has the same exact recipe. But what he did here, it was create a recipe that we get to see and enjoy in his other stuff. And it makes those movies more powerful too, just with that storytelling.
For sure. Spike, in the limited scope that I have that we're working on changing, he definitely has a stamp and he definitely has a look and a style. And now having seen a handful of his films, you can tell a Spike Lee film, and I think it's really cool. Despite how I left the movie, all the way up until everything came to a head and after the movie settled in and I realized what had happened, I had a fucking blast watching this movie. It was so much fun. The way that everything paced. It seemed like a dance the whole time. You know what I mean? Like it was like everything was moving, everything was breathing, everything was just kind of vibing together, and you kind of just you're whipping around these different lives. In I think it was a really cool way to sort of know what it's like to live in that community and be able to live there for a minute and feel it. And I'm glad it got made, and I'm glad to talk about it with you guys. I'm curious, Ben, if you had to pick your favorite moment from the film, what would it be?
I mean, it's hard not to be the whole trash can one shot. Just, I know it's the seminal part of the whole movie. Like it's what sets it all off, so to speak. But it's a great moment in the film. Like I love so much about this movie. I feel like I could pick 10 of them, but if I had to pick one, that would be my favorite shot, my favorite scene of this movie.
Matt?
To pick something different, it's got to be that opening sequence of Samuel Jackson on the radio, walking through the street. I think that's just like such a perfect setup for everything that's to come. But yeah, it does like start off with that really good feeling, like this is going to be awesome, and it's just crazy where it ends up by the end of the film.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't going to end up good, but I wrote down like how fucking cool is Sam Jackson? Like I wrote down like he's not even trying, and he's a better podcast host than any three of us would ever be.
And that's the double truth, Ruth.
Like he's doing it as a role, and I feel like he's perfect.
And what a character name too.
Yeah.
Mr. Senior Love Daddy.
For sure. And like his little hooks
so
and catchphrases, like I don't know, he's another representation. He's just like those characters are so real. Like this almost in a lot of ways could have been a documentary. Like it felt really real to me. And I thought it was really cool. I think in that light, probably my favorite scene was the first time we meet the three older guys sitting around just talking shit. It reminded me of sitting around in the break room at Delta, listening to people, because we worked with people from all over the world, from all over the place, and just listening to, being able to kind of get back and listen into a conversation like that was really cool for me. And I didn't know that it was all improvised, but it doesn't surprise me.
Sweet Dick Willie.
It felt very real to me. I also really appreciated, like we were talking about how things haven't really changed, and how unfortunately, racism has been a through line from then to now, and even before then. I also really appreciated that Miller Lite has changed absolutely zero in all those times. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but in the Korean grocery store, the DeMayor's looking for beer,
same.
And you can see cans of Miller Lite. I thought that was funny. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. This popped out to me, but the shot of Mookie and Rosie Perez, what is her name in the film?
Tina.
That's right, Tina. He dedicates the song to Tina. Is it ever discussed if they're like, are they married? Are they officially together? Like, do we get any inclination? I get the vibe they're not married and that they're very loosely dating.
That's definitely the vibe I get from this too. I don't think they stuck around together for the long haul.
That's a bummer. But I love the shot of the close-up of their lips when they were kissing. I thought that was really cool. Spike knows how to put together a shot.
Speaking of shots with Rosie Perez, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but that opening dance scene, he had her dance for 8 hours.
I was wondering. I was like...
To get that opening
I was
shot.
wondering, like, God damn, they had to have cut this so many times.
I know, right? Like, there's so much going on. Like, the backstory is interesting. He just saw her at a party, and they started having... I forget what the phrase was, but I think it was essentially like a twerking contest of sorts. And that's how we met Rosie Perez. Then he started talking to her and he loved her voice and cast her in this movie. That was it. That's how she got in this movie. It's crazy.
That is crazy.
And I think this opening thing was the first stuff that she shot for the film. And I, like myself, I would assume like, all right, maybe an hour and we'll get this, but she was there for 8 hours dancing for that opening shot. I think at the time she was the choreographer for the Fly Girls, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's super cool. Well, fellas, unless you have anything else to add, I think we've I think we've talked about this movie about as much as three white guys from the suburbs can. So,
I think the last thing I want to add, again, like I know we've talked about this a lot already, but one character we haven't mentioned that I feel is like just vital to the film is Smiley, who's walking around with the Martin Luther King and Malcolm X cards. And we see him and he comes across almost like a nuisance to people. You know, he's like, all right, fine, here's some money. Like, just, you know, get out of my way. But the fact that we end the film with the quotes from Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and we show the photo of them together. Yeah, I love that we see the postcard of them together and the quotes that come up afterwards. And I don't want to paraphrase what they say, so I'll read it so you guys can see it. But for Martin Luther King saying, violence as a way of achieving racial justice is both impractical and immoral. It is impractical because it is a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. The old law of an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. And then for Malcolm X saying, I don't even call it violence when it's self-defense. I call it intelligence. And I think those somewhat competing views are representative of what this whole movie is about. It's how you view things. It's how it affects you personally and how you choose to deal with it. And I just think having the two of them as a through line with those cards throughout the whole movie and then ending with those quotes just spoke perfectly as to what Do the Right Thing was meant to do and just like invoke some self-reflection, I think, in everybody.
For sure. And I'm glad you brought it up. I wanted to talk about it, but, we get to chatting and I forget. But I think it's a pretty powerful statement that the whole movie kicks off because Bugging Out doesn't like the pictures on the wall. And in the end, you tear everything down, you burn it down, and you get the picture on the wall. And hopefully some progress is made. We can only hope. So far, that hasn't proven to be the truth, unfortunately. But I think hopefully we get more movies like this, and we can hear from more voices like this. And I'm excited to keep exploring.
Definitely.
Well, I guess that's going to do it. We can sign off now. This has been 3 Films in a Podcast. And we're looking forward to keep doing this. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We'd be curious to hear your thoughts. And follow along. I think next we're going to talk about the 25th hour. So stay tuned for that. Cheers, everyone.